Hello, and welcome to another episode of the French Galaxy. And today we're going to be talking about the passé composé. So make sure you get your notes and blast off.
Life, not for honor, but for you. In my time, there'll be no one.
So, before we even start to conjugate the passé composé, we first have to understand what is the passé composé. The passé composé is the past. It is an action that had happened and it's over and done with. Okay? So, what is an example in English? Take, for example, swim. To say I swim in the past, I swam. To say I run in the past, I ran. To say I jump in the past, I jumped. There you go, right? When it comes to French, though, we can't do that. Okay, we can't just say I or he or we or they, etc., did this and then kaboom, it's over. To actually complete the phrase, we have to say I had and then, did whatever the verb is, right? So, for an example of that would be j'ai mangé, right? So what we have to do is we have to take our pronoun. So we're going to take, je in this example. And then we're going to take the second building block, which is avoir. We're going to conjugate that. So instead of it being je ai mangé, it's going to be j'ai mangé. And then, of course, our final building block, which is going to be our verb, and that's going to be manger. But to actually see what that would look like, here, I'll write it down for you. J'ai mangé. Don't mind all the other clutter. I'll explain it in a bit. But right here, j'ai mangé. Again, we're taking our pronoun. This is the first building block. Second building block is avoir. The next building block is going to be our verb that we're actually trying to conjugate to let people know that we did this action. There are, of course, a few other considerations that we have to go over, right? Which should, of course, be the fact that, don't you remember that French is a language that uses gender a lot? So, with that being said, oftentimes the conjugation will change very slightly depending on if the thing we're talking about, or, like the thing we're talking about, for example, is feminine, right? So let's take an example like, let's say in English, in French, I want to say, let's take, for example, not I eat the plant. The plant, I eat it. Now, in French, that would be la plante, je l'ai mangée, which again doesn't sound that different, but it's because the thing that comes before the verb, the thing that comes before manger, is feminine. La plante is feminine, right? So, if we want to say, oh, the plant, I ate it. In French, to spell it correctly, we would have to spell it like this. Let me just write it down for you. Like this. La plante, je l'ai mangée. Now, why did I put je instead of j'ai mangé? Okay? Because when it comes to talking about really anything, okay, this is kind of like saying the plant, oh, I ate it, right? Or you could honestly just say la plante, you couldn't actually. But anyways, the reason why you're putting that L right there is because that's going to be talking directly about the plant, right? That's how you say it in French. That's like the closest thing you have to, saying it, right? Is you're going to put, like, if you want to say, I don't know, instead of saying I like the chocolate, you could say I like it by saying je l'aime, right? Because you're just taking whatever, like if it's a le or a la, doesn't matter. If it comes to being like a vowel like, A, for example, when it comes to avoir. It doesn't matter, what it is. You just put L apostrophe, conjugation. But when it comes to, let's take, for example, um, eating, if I eat the plant, je la mange. So with that being said, again, la plante, the thing we're actually talking about, comes before, manger and avoir. So we're going to conjugate manger to have an extra e. So instead of it just being manger with an accent aigu, right? So that funny little accent on the end of manger, we're going to add an extra e to indicate that the thing that we ate is feminine. There you go. Some other considerations, though, would of course be if we take that same example, but instead of saying just la plante, you could say les plantes. If I say les plantes, je les ai mangées, I would have to take, of course, it's feminine, right? So I have to add an extra e. Plus, I said les, so it's plural. So I would have to add an extra s to the end. And I made a little chart for that too, right? So again, let's take an IR verb, right? So let's take bottles for example. La bouteille. Bottles are feminine in French, right? So if I want to say, I took the bottle, the bottle, I took it out, right? I would say la bouteille, je l'ai sortie, right? So I would, of course, conjugate sortir. I would add my I because it's an IR verb. I would, of course, have to add then an E because it's feminine as well. Now, if I were to say, again, the bottles, I took them out, right? Like, I don't know where I took them out of, but the bottles, I took them out. I would then have to say, les bouteilles, je les ai sorties. I would have to say that. I would have to have, of course, my I at the end, my E at the end, and then an S to indicate that it is plural, to indicate that I took out multiple things. If I'm not taking out multiple things, I don't need an S. If the thing I'm not taking out is feminine, then I can just keep the I, and that's it. But yeah, those are really the only major considerations that you have to go over when it comes to understanding the passé composé. So for just a general review of things, right? When it comes to our ER verbs, again, we're going to, like, for the most part, if the thing we're talking about is masculine, or if we're just saying, like, just straight up, like, if someone just asks you, what'd you do yesterday? You could just be like, if you were saying, like, I wrote yesterday, just for whatever reason, you'd be like, j'ai écrit, right? Because that's écrire is an ER verb. Sorry, not ER verb, IR verb. We're going to just put I at the end. J'ai écrit. There you go. Again, when it comes to avoir, when it comes to je, again, we're going to have a. We're going to conjugate avoir in the present tense. So again, if I'm saying, I ate this, j'ai mangé. There you go, right? Again, conjugate. The first thing you have to do is you have to have your pronoun, whatever your pronoun is, whatever. Then you have to have your you have to have avoir conjugated correctly, and then on top of that, you have to have the correct conjugation, like the correct spelling, the correct conjugation of your action that your past completed action. It sounds like a lot. It's really simple once you get used to it. You can just do it off your head. There are, of course, again, one other consideration would be when it comes to irregular verbs. When it comes to irregular verbs, you have to understand that their spelling might be totally different, right? Like it might be an IR verb, but it's conjugated in the past like an RE verb, for example. Okay? That just a whole bucket of worms, which I will get into in the episode of the French Galaxy for Dr. P, Mrs. Vandertramp, along with, irregular verbs in general. But yeah. So that is going to be the end of this episode of the French Galaxy, and I will see you later. Make sure you take notes and you see our other episodes.